right, diving right in, we've got some excerpts here from Vulnerable or Weak, Exploring the Complexity of Male Emotions.
Yeah.
And I'm super curious to unpack some of this. Seems like we're going to go pretty deep on masculinity today, especially how it relates to relationships. And from what you've sent over, this book doesn't seem to shy away from, well, from anything.
No, it really doesn't. And it's fascinating how it tackles this whole idea of equality.
Yeah.
Or maybe the illusion of equality.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly when you look at things like family law, marriage, that sort of thing.
That's something you've brought up a few times, actually, how modern family law, maybe it has some unintended consequences, especially for men.
Right.
It seems like this book, it jumps right into that, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah.
Okay.
The author argues the way alimony is often used today is a prime example. The idea was to support women who, couldn't work. But the book highlights how these days, even when both people in the marriage, both spouses, have similar jobs and earn the same amount of money, alimony can still be awarded in a way that puts men at a real disadvantage financially.
Right. Like the system hasn't quite caught up with the times, with the changing roles of men and women in society.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of something we talked about before. Those covert contracts in relationship, the expectations versus the legal side of things.
Absolutely. And the book, it even suggests that some men are now choosing alternatives to traditional marriage, like prenuptial agreements or even remaining unmarried as a way to protect themselves.
Yeah, it's almost like they're trying to rewrite that contract.
Right.
Create more balanced terms from the beginning.
Exactly. And this kind of leads into another big thing the book tackles. Toxic masculinity.
Oh, yeah, toxic masculinity. That's a term you hear everywhere these days.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see how this book approaches that whole concept.
Yeah, well, the author actually kind of pushes back on the idea that masculinity itself is toxic.
Okay.
He argues it's more of a spectrum. You have the negative expressions of masculinity, of course.
Right.
But there are also incredibly positive traits. Traits that have historically been essential for progress.
Like, strength, resilience.
Exact bravery, protective. I mean, those qualities were essential for societies to function, to survive even. The book even goes back and draws some parallels to ancient civilizations like Sparta and Rome.
Okay, now why those societies? What was it about their cultures
Yeah.
that emphasized those traits?
Well, think about it. Sparta was a warrior society. Their whole culture was built around military strength, discipline.
Right.
So in that context, being stoic, being emotionally controlled, those weren't just, personality traits. Those were seen as survival skills, essential for success on the battle.
So it wasn't just about being tough for the sake of being tough.
Exactly.
It was tied to the very real dangers they faced.
Exactly. And in Rome, it was similar. Their expansion, their dominance, it all relied heavily on military power.
Right.
And their social hierarchy with that emphasis on honor and duty that also shaped those masculine ideals.
So in a way, those traits, they were products of their time and their circumstance.
Precisely. And the book argues that understanding this historical context, it's crucial for navigating these modern discussions about masculinity.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like you're really drawn to that historical perspective.
Yeah.
Is that something you find yourself thinking about a lot?
Definitely.
Especially, in relation to your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, if we don't understand where these ideas came from, how they evolved, it's easy to fall into this trap of judging the past by today's standards.
I get that. And this book seems like it's really trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
To show how these historical forces, they still shape how we see things today.
Absolutely. And this ties directly into another big issue the book dives into, child custody.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's one where I know you have strong feelings.
Oh, yeah.
You've shared about your own custody battles,
Right.
how the system, how it felt stacked against you.
Yeah, it's a tough subject, and this book really gets into the claim that the system, the family law system, is often biased against fathers. It even cites statistics showing that over 80% of child support payments in the U.S.
Right.
are made by fathers.
80%, that's huge.
It is. And what I found especially insightful was how the author connected this back to the historical role of men as provider.
Okay.
He argues that while society has shifted, with more women in the workforce, that ingrained perception of men being the financial backbone of the family, it hasn't quite disappeared.
Yeah, so even though things are changing, those old assumptions,
Right.
they can still linger,
Right.
influencing things like custody decisions, child support calculations.
Exactly. And it creates this double bind for a lot of men.
Right.
On one hand, they're expected to be financially successful, to be the provider.
Yeah.
But then when relationships break down, that very success can be used against them.
It's almost like they're being penalized for fulfilling that traditional role.
Exactly.
And I know this is something you've grappled with personally.
Yeah.
How do you see this book's argument fitting into your own experience?
It's validating, to be honest. For a long time, I felt like I was alone in this struggle. But seeing this author lay out these arguments backed by research, by statistics,
Yeah.
it helps me understand the bigger picture.
Right.
It's not just about me and my ex, It's about a system that's still struggling to catch up with the changing dynamics of family and relationships.
You're starting to see the pattern,
Yeah.
the forces at play beyond your individual experience.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just opinion.
Right.
It's connecting the dots between history, societal expectations,
Right.
and the very real challenges that men are facing today.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break here.
Sure.
And we'll be right back to dive into more of Vulnerable or Weak after this.
And this feeling of being, caught in a system that doesn't always seem fair.
Yeah.
It kind of feeds into another big theme the book explores.
Yeah.
This idea of the double bind of male vulnerability.
Okay, I've heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I totally get it. What exactly does that mean?
It's this pressure men face to be both strong and vulnerable at the same time, which creates a real dilemma.
Yeah.
On one hand, there's this expectation to be stoic, resilient, the classic strong, silent type.
Right.
But on the other hand, men are told to open up, to share their feelings.
So it's like they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Exactly. And the book, it goes into how this plays out in relationships, in the workplace, even in men's own internal lives.
Right.
You mentioned earlier, feeling like the system was stacked against you in your custody battle.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to express your vulnerability, your sadness, your frustration with that,
Yeah.
while also being expected to stay strong for your kids, to fight for what you believe in.
Right.
It's a tough balancing act.
That's a really powerful way to put it. Yeah.
It is.
It's like navigating a minefield of expectations where any step can be misinterpreted.
Exactly. And the book argues that this double bind, it can lead to men suppressing their emotions, which, that can have all sorts of negative consequences.
Right, for their mental health, for the relationship.
Exactly.
Exactly. So what's the solution? How can men break free from this double bind?
Well, the author suggests it starts with understanding the historical context we talked about earlier.
Correct.
For centuries, men were raised with this idea that showing vulnerability was a weakness. But that was a different time with different challenges.
Right.
Today, being able to connect with your emotions, to communicate authentically, those are strengths, not weaknesses.
It's like the definition of strength itself has evolved.
Exactly. And that evolution is also playing out in another area the book explores, the role of competition in masculinity.
Okay, this is where I think things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because competition, especially among men,
Right.
it often gets, a bad rap.
Yeah.
It's seen as aggressive, even toxic.
Right. But this book offers a different perspective.
Right.
It argues that competition, when it's channeled in a healthy way, can actually be a really powerful force for growth, for connection among men.
So it's not about winning at all costs
Yeah.
or putting other guys down.
No, not at all.
Okay.
The author, he draws some fascinating historical parallels, comparing, ancient gladiators to modern day athletes. He argues that competition, at its core,
Yeah.
it's about pushing yourself to be your best,
Right.
about striving for excellence. And that can be incredibly motivating and inspiring.
Okay, but how does that tie into the idea of masculinity?
Well, think about it. Historically, men were often in competition for resources, for status, for mates. It's kind of ingrained in our biology in a way.
Right.
But the book suggests that we can reframe that competitive instinct.
Okay.
Use it to fuel personal growth.
Yeah.
To challenge ourselves, to build camaraderie with other men.
So instead of competing against each other,
Exactly.
it's more about competing with yourself, with your own limitations.
And the author even argues that this healthy competition can actually strengthen bonds between men. Think about a group of guys playing basketball, pushing each other to improve,
Yeah.
celebrating each other's success.
Yeah, I get that.
There's a sense of camaraderie there, a shared pursuit of excellence.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's like that shared challenge.
Yeah.
It creates a bond, a sense of of brotherhood.
Precisely. And that leads into another somewhat controversial topic the book explores, the importance of male spaces.
Yeah, this is one where I know people have strong opinions.
Yeah, and the author argues that in a world where men are often told to adapt to female-centric spaces, having those environments where they can connect with each other on a deeper level, free from those pressures and expectations, that it's actually crucial for their well-being and personal growth.
But doesn't that sound a bit, I don't know, exclusionary? Like we're going back to the old boys club mentality.
That's a valid concern. And the author, he addresses it head on. He's not saying women should be excluded from all aspects of men's lives. But he argues that just as women benefit from having spaces of their own, men also need those environments where they can explore their masculinity, connect with each other authentically, and work through the challenges they face, sometimes without feeling the need to filter themselves or conform to certain expectations.
So it's less about excluding women and more about creating a space where men can be themselves fully.
Exactly. He even compares these male spaces to a sanctuary, a place where men can let their guard down, be vulnerable with each other, and support each other in a way that's sometimes harder to do in mixed gender settings.
That makes sense, yeah. It's like creating a space where you can work on yourself, on those internal struggles, without feeling judged or pressured to conform to certain expectations.
Right. And he emphasizes that these spaces, they should be inclusive and welcome, not exclusive and discriminatory. They should be places where men can challenge harmful stereotypes, support each other's growth, and ultimately become better versions of themselves.
That resonates with me.
Yeah.
It's not about going back to some outdated model of masculinity. It's about creating a space for men to evolve, to redefine what it means to be a man in a way that's healthy and fulfilling.
And this idea of redefining masculinity, it's really at the heart of another big topic the book explores, the impact of technology and specifically pornography on modern men.
Yeah, this is a big one. It feels like everywhere you turn, there's this debate about how technology is shaping our lives, our relationship, even our sense of self.
It's unavoidable at this point. The author, he dives into how this easy access to pornography is affecting men's views of women, their own body image, and their ability to form healthy relationships.
It's like we're bombarded with these unrealistic, often hypersexualized images, and it's hard to escape their influence.
Exactly. And the book argues that this constant exposure, it can create a distorted view of intimacy and relationships, setting men up for unrealistic expectations and potentially fueling insecurities.
It's like comparing yourself to a fantasy, which is never a recipe for a healthy self-image.
Right. And the author, he doesn't shy away from the addictive nature of pornography either. He compares it to drug addiction in terms of its ability to hijack the brain's reward system, leading to compulsive behavior and potentially interfering with real life relationships.
That's a pretty stark comparison.
It is, but he's not advocating for censorship or abstinence. Instead, he's urging men to be mindful of their pornography consumption, to understand its potential impact, and to make conscious choices about how they engage with it, if at all.
It's about taking control of your digital diet in a way, being aware of what you're consuming, and making choices that align with your values and your goals for healthy relationships.
Exactly. And speaking of healthy relationships, the book then circles back to a topic we touched on earlier, the importance of fathers in society. But this time, it's about more than just, custody battles and legal systems.
So it's about the deeper impact of fatherhood, the role that fathers play in shaping their children's lives.
Right. The author takes a historical perspective, tracing the evolution of fatherhood from ancient times to the present day. He emphasizes how crucial fathers are for their children's development, providing not just financial support, but also emotional guidance, role modeling, a sense of security.
That resonates with my own experience. My dad wasn't perfect, but he was always there for me, offering support and encouragement. I know I wouldn't be who I am today without his influence.
And I think that's a sentiment shared by a lot of men. The book highlights how despite the challenges fatherhood can bring, it's also incredibly rewarding. And it argues that society needs to recognize and support fathers more, acknowledging the the vital role they play in families and communities.
That's like we're still grappling with how to define fatherhood
Right.
in a world where traditional gender roles are shifting.
Exactly.
This book seems to be pushing for a more nuanced and balanced view.
Absolutely. He's not romanticizing fatherhood,
Right.
but he is advocating for a greater appreciation of its importance and a greater understanding of the unique challenges fathers face.
And this idea of men facing unique challenges, it leads into another really important section of the book, the rise of men's advocacy groups. This is something I know you've been involved with personally.
Right.
And it feels like it's gaining momentum.
It is, and the author seems really enthusiastic about this development.
Okay.
He sees it as a sign that men are finally starting to speak up about the issues they face and to demand better treatment.
So it's not about complaining or playing the victim.
No, not at all.
Cool.
It's about advocating for their needs, for their rights.
Right.
He specifically mentions the statistic that men are more likely to commit suicide than women, highlighting this silent crisis of male mental health.
That's a really sobering statistic.
It is.
And it speaks to the fact that men are often taught to suppress their emotions, to man up, instead of seeking help.
Exactly. And the author argues that men need spaces where they can connect with each other, share their experiences, and support one another.
Yeah.
He sees men's advocacy groups as providing that vital space.
It's about creating a sense of community, of brotherhood,
Right.
where men can be vulnerable and find strength in each other.
Absolutely. And he also talks about the importance of male vulnerability, not as a weakness, but as a strength.
It's like flipping the script on that old-fashioned definition of masculinity.
Exactly. He's challenging the traditional view that equates stoicism with strength. He's advocating for a new definition of masculinity that embraces vulnerability, emotional intelligence, and open communication.
That resonates with what we were talking about earlier about
Yeah.
the double bind of vulnerability. It's
Right.
like he's saying it's okay for men to be both strong and sensitive,
Right.
to express their emotions without shame.
Precisely. And he believes that this shift in thinking, it's essential for men's mental and emotional well-being, especially in a world where traditional sources of identity and purpose are being eroded.
It's like finding a new path forward, one that's more authentic and fulfilling.
Right. And this idea of finding a new path, it leads us to a topic that can be, a little bit controversial, the intersection of religion and masculinity.
Okay, this is one where I'm really curious to hear what the author has to say.
Yeah.
Religion has played such a powerful role in shaping our understanding of gender roles.
It has. The author, he examines how different religions have shaped perceptions of masculinity throughout history, pointing to examples like Christianity and Islam, where strong male leadership is emphasized.
And that emphasis on strong male leadership, it's often been used to justify patriarchal structures.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
But the author doesn't shy away from that critique.
Yeah.
He acknowledges that religion has sometimes been used to justify harmful practices.
Right, like violence or discrimination.
Exactly.
So is he advocating for men to abandon religion altogether?
No, not at all.
Oh,
He's
fair.
not promoting or condemning any particular religion. Instead, he's encouraging readers to think critically about their own beliefs and to challenge any religious teachings that promote harmful or destructive behavior.
It's about finding a balance
Yeah.
between respecting tradition and promoting a more just and equitable world.
Exactly. And he also talks about the positive role that religion can play in men's lives, providing a sense of purpose and meaning, especially in a world where traditional sources of identity are being questioned.
So it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
No.
It's about examining your beliefs, holding on to what's positive
Right.
and challenging what's harmful.
Right. And this critical examination, it extends to another area the book tackles head on, the burden of proof in legal cases, particularly those involving accusations against men.
Okay, this is a sensitive topic,
Yeah, it is.
one where it's easy to get into heated debate.
Yeah.
What's the author's perspective here?
He argues that men are often held to a different standard of proof than women, especially in cases involving sexual assault or domestic violence.
So he's saying there's a bias against men within the legal system.
He's not denying that these crimes happen or that women are often the victims.
Yeah.
But he is raising concerns about how the legal system can can sometimes be weighted against men, particularly when emotions run high and there's this pressure to believe all women.
That's a tough line to walk.
It is.
Ensuring
Yeah.
that victims are heard and believed
Right.
while also protecting the rights of the accused.
Exactly. And the author, he cites specific examples,
Yeah.
the use of shield laws that
Yeah.
can restrict the accused from presenting certain types of evidence, even if that evidence is relevant to the case.
Yeah.
He's not saying that women shouldn't be protected,
Right.
but that the system should strive for fairness and due process for everyone involved.
So it's about advocating for a legal system that's balanced,
Right.
that protects the rights of both the accuser and the accused.
Right, and he also expresses concerns about the impact of false accusations on men's lives, arguing that they can have devastating consequences, even if they are later proven to be untrue.
Yeah, that's a really difficult situation.
It is. It's a delicate balance,
Yeah.
but the author believes that open and honest dialogue is essential for creating a system that is truly just and equitable for everyone.
Like, we need to have these difficult conversations,
Yeah.
even if they're uncomfortable,
Right.
in order to create a system that works better for everyone involved.
Exactly. And this leads into a section where the author attempts to reclaim what he sees as positive aspects of masculinity that have been, unfairly demonized in recent years. Starting with the concept of masculine strength.
Okay, I'm intrigued because it feels like any discussion of masculine strength these days
Right.
immediately gets labeled as toxic or problematic.
Right. But the author argues that this is a gross oversimplification. He traces the evolution of strength from early man to the present day,
Okay.
showing how the definition of strength has changed over time.
Okay.
It was once primarily about physical prowess,
Right.
But now it encompasses things like mental resilience, emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and the ability to lead and provide for others.
So it's not just about brute force anymore. It's
Yeah.
about a more holistic view of strength,
Exactly.
encompassing both physical and mental toughness.
Exactly. And he even draws a distinction between strength and aggression,
Okay.
arguing that true strength is not about dominating others, but about using your power to protect and support those around you.
It's about being a protector, a provider, a leader,
Right.
in a way that benefits others,
Right.
not just yourself.
Exactly. And he's not glorifying violence or toxic masculinity.
Right.
He's advocating for a more nuanced and balanced view of what it means to be a strong man in today's world.
It's like reclaiming those positive aspects of masculinity
Yeah.
that have gotten lost in the shuffle, showing that strength can be a force for good.
Exact. And this idea of reclaiming positive aspects of masculinity.
Yeah.
It also extends to another area we've already touched on, the importance of male-only spaces.
We talked about this in the context of vulnerability and connection,
Right.
but I'm curious to see how he delves deeper into this topic.
Well, he argues that these spaces have been, unfairly demonized in recent years, often being labeled as sexist or exclusionary.
Right.
He believes that this criticism often misses the point.
All right.
It's not about shutting women out, but about creating a space where men can work on themselves, become better versions of themselves, and then use that growth to make a positive impact on the world.
So it's not about creating a boys' club that reinforces negative stereotypes.
Right.
It's about building a brotherhood of men who support each other,
Yeah.
challenge each other, and work together to become better men.
Exactly. He identifies several key functions of these male-only spaces.
Okay.
For starters, they allow men to bond with each other in ways that are often difficult in mixed gender settings.
You mean because of those societal expectations we talked about earlier?
Precisely.
The pressure to maintain a certain image of masculinity.
Exactly. In a male-only space,
Yeah.
men can let their guard down, share their struggles, and receive support from other men who understand what they're going through. It's about creating a safe space where they can be authentically themselves without feeling like they have to, perform or conform to certain expectations.
It's like a pressure valve release,
Yeah.
a place where they can be vulnerable without fear of judgment.
Right. And the author also points out that male-only spaces can provide opportunities for for mentorship and guidance.
Okay.
Younger men can learn from the experiences of older men, gaining valuable insights into life, relationships, careers.
Like having a built-in support system
Yeah.
of guys who have been there and done that.
Right. And it's not just about, practical advice.
Right.
It's about having role models who embody positive aspects of masculinity. Men who are strong and successful, but also compassionate, emotionally intelligent, and engaged in their community.
It's about showing young men that there are different ways to be a man.
Exactly.
And that it's okay to break free from traditional stereotypes.
Exactly. And the author also highlights the importance of networking and professional development within male-only spaces.
Okay.
He argues that these environments can offer, unique opportunities to connect with other men in your field,
Yeah.
learn from their experiences, and potentially advance your career.
So it's not just about personal growth.
Right.
It's about leveraging the power of male camaraderie to support each other's professional ambitions as well.
Exactly. And finally, he even talks about how male-only spaces can foster a sense of responsibility and accountability.
No.
He argues that when men come together in these environments,
Yeah.
they're more likely to hold each other to a higher standard, both personally and professionally.
Okay.
It's like having a built-in system of checks and balances.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like having a group of guys who will call you out when you're slipping,
Right.
who will challenge you to be your best self.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly valuable for men who are trying to navigate the complexities of life and to live up to their full potential.
So while the idea of male-only spaces can seem, controversial,
Right.
the author makes a pretty compelling case for their potential benefits.
He does.
Especially in a world where men are facing so many pressures and challenges.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that these spaces, they're not meant to be a replacement for healthy relationships with women
Sure.
or for engaging in mixed gender environments.
They're more like a complement,
Right.
A way for men to work on themselves and to support each other,
Yeah.
so they can show up more fully in all areas of their lives.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the role of technology in men's lives.
Okay.
Because while we talked about the potential downsides of easy access to pornography,
Right.
the author also acknowledges that technology has brought about many positive changes for men.
Like what?
Well, he talks about how technology has created new opportunities for connection, for communication, for entrepreneurship.
Okay.
He even shares an anecdote about how he used the internet to launch his own business and to connect with other men who share his interests.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But he does caution that men need to be mindful of how they're using technology. He's worried that too much screen time can lead to social isolation and that the constant bombardment of information and stimulation can be overwhelming and distracting.
It's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Right.
Harnessing the power of technology without letting it take over your life.
Right. And he also expresses concerns about the ways in which technology can erode traditional masculine roles and values.
What do you mean?
He talks about how automation and artificial intelligence are displacing men from jobs that were once considered, manly, like manufacturing and construction.
Okay.
He worries that this trend could lead to more men feeling like they lack purpose or direction in life.
It's like that loss of those traditional roles
Right.
can create a sense of identity crisis for some men.
Exactly. And he also talks about the impact of social media
Yeah.
on men's self-esteem and body image. He argues that social media often presents a distorted and unrealistic view of masculinity,
Right.
which can make men feel, inadequate or insecure.
It's the comparison game,
Right, yeah.
amplified by algorithms and filters.
So while technology has, undeniable benefits,
Yeah.
he's encouraging men to be aware of the potential pitfalls
Right.
and to use technology in a way that enhances their lives, not detracts from them.
It's about being intentional, conscious, discerning in your use of technology, which is something we could all probably benefit from.
Absolutely. And this need for intentionality.
Yeah.
It also applies to another area the book explores, the role of sports in men's lives.
Okay, this is one I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
Because sports have always been seen as such a central part of the male experience.
Right.
But it feels like it's changing in a lot of ways.
It is. And the author acknowledges that this change is bringing about both both challenges and opportunities for men.
In what way?
Well, he talks about how the rise of women's sports is challenging traditional notions of masculine, forcing men to redefine what it means to be a man in a world where athletic achievement is no longer exclusively male.
It's like those old lines are blurring,
right?
And it's forcing everyone to reconsider what it means to be strong, competitive, successful.
Exactly, and he also expresses concerns about the increasing commercialization and politicization of sports, arguing that these trends are eroding the purity of competition and the sense of brotherhood that once defined male athletic culture.
It's like the focus has shifted from personal growth and development to entertainment and profit.
Exactly. He worries that sports are becoming less about pushing yourself to be your best, and more about, brand building and social media posturing.
That's a bit disheartening.
It is.
But I guess it's a reflection of the larger societal trends we've been talking about.
It is, but the author isn't, advocating for a return to some. But the author isn't advocating for a return to some mythical golden age of sports.
No.
Instead, he's urging readers to think critically about the ways in which sports are changing, and to work towards preserving the positive aspects of male athletic culture.
So it's about holding on to the values of teamwork, discipline, perseverance, camaraderie, even as the landscape of sports continues to evolve.
Exactly. And speaking of evolving landscapes, the book then tackles a topic that's often seen as both a source of pleasure and a source of controversy: pornography.
Okay, we talked about this briefly before in the context of technology's impact.
Right.
I'm guessing he dives a bit deeper here.
He does, and he doesn't shy away from the complexities of this issue. He acknowledges that pornography can be a source of pleasure and entertainment for men.
Right.
But he also expresses serious concerns about its potential negative impact.
Like the way it can distort men's views of women, their own sexuality, healthy relationships.
Exactly. He's particularly concerned about the unrealistic and often degrading portrayals of women in pornography, arguing that they can contribute to a culture of justification and exploitation.
It's like it creates a fantasy world that's far removed from the realities of intimacy and respect.
Right, and he also highlights the addictive nature of pornography, comparing it to drug addiction in terms of its ability to hijack the brain's reward system and lead to compulsive behavior.
That's a pretty serious concern.
It is. And he's not saying that all men who watch pornography are addicts.
Right.
But he's urging readers to be mindful of their consumption and to consider the potential consequence.
It's about being honest with yourself about how pornography is affecting you, and making choices that are aligned with your values and your goals for healthy relationships.
Precisely. And he also talks about the impact of pornography on men's ability to form and maintain healthy relationships, arguing that it can create unrealistic expectations, fuel insecurity, and lead to emotional detachment.
So it's not just about the moral implications, it's about the very real impact it can have on your ability to connect with others on a deeper level.
Exactly. And he's not advocating for censorship or abstinence, but he is encouraging men to engage with pornography in a more mindful and responsible way, if they choose to engage with it at all.
It's about reclaiming your agency, making conscious choices about what you consume and how you engage with sexuality, rather than passively letting yourself be shaped by external forces.
Right, and this idea of reclaiming your agency, it's really important for navigating another challenge the book addresses: men's mental health.
Okay, this is a topic that's close to my heart. I've seen firsthand how men often struggle in silence, feeling like they can't talk about their emotions or seek help when they need it.
The author clearly feels passionately about this subject as well. He talks about the alarmingly high rates of suicide among men, arguing that it's a silent crisis that's often ignored or downplayed.
It's like we're still clinging to that outdated notion that men should be tough and stoic. That asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Right. And he attributes this crisis in part to the societal pressures that men face to suppress their emotions, to to man up in the face of adversity.
It's like we're taught to bottle up our feelings,
Yeah.
which can lead to all sorts of problems down the road.
Exactly. He talks about how these expectations can lead to men bottling up their feelings,
Yeah.
which can result in a range of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and substance abuse.
It's like a pressure cooker
Yeah.
that eventually explodes.
He's not saying that men are inherently weaker than women,
Right.
but that they are often taught to cope with their emotions in unhealthy ways.
It's a cultural conditioning that can be incredibly damaging.
Precisely. And he's advocating for a more open and honest conversation about men's mental health, encouraging men to seek help when needed and to challenge the stigma surrounding mental illness.
It's about normalizing the idea that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
That seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Exactly. And he also highlights the importance of male friendships and
Yeah.
supports
Right.
arguing that they can provide men with the emotional outlet and validation they need to navigate life's challenges.
It's about having those guys in your corner
Right.
who you can confide in,
Yeah.
who will listen without judgment,
Yeah.
and who will remind you
Yeah.
that you're not alone.
Right. It's about recognizing that men need each other just as much as women do,
Wow.
and that there's strength in vulnerability and connection.
That's a really powerful message, I think.
It is.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah. We have.
Really exploring the complexities of masculinity in the modern world.
Yeah, and the challenges men face.
Right, and how those challenges are often shaped by historical forces, by societal expectation,
Yeah.
and by the evolving roles of men and women in society.
Absolutely. And the author, he doesn't shy away from the tough questions.
No, he really doesn't.
He challenges us to think critically, to question our assumptions,
Yeah.
and to work towards creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
And he does it in a way that's both insightful and thought-provoking.
It's a really compelling read.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
You know.
Well, to our listener who sent in these excerpts, I hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
I hope so.
Some new perspectives to consider.
Yeah.
And maybe even some inspiration to continue exploring these complex and evolving issues.
And for anyone else who's interested in delving deeper into these topics.
Yep. We highly recommend checking out Vulnerable or Weak, exploring the complexity of male emotion.
It's a book that can really challenge your assumptions,
Yeah.
expand your understanding of masculinity, and empower you to create a more fulfilling and authentic life.
It's a valuable resource for men of all ages.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
You know.
Well, that's going to do it for this deep dive.
Okay.
Thanks for joining me, and thanks to our listener for sending in those thought-provoking excerpts.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.